Corruption in India. A deep-rooted issue. Introduction. Corruption has been an endemic issue in India for centuries. It's a topic that invokes strong opinions, and rightfully so, as it affects every facet of Indian society. From politics to businesses, education, healthcare, and even daily life, corruption undermines trust, fuels inequality, and hinders development. This script delves into the roots of corruption in India, its pervasive impact, efforts to combat it, and the challenges that lie ahead in the fight against it. Understanding corruption. Corruption, at its core, is the abuse of power for personal gain. In India, corruption manifests in numerous ways, including bribery, favoritism, embezzlement, nepotism, and kickbacks. It pervades both the public and private sectors, as well as society at large. Public officials, politicians, law enforcement, bureaucrats, and business leaders are often the culprits, but even ordinary citizens are sometimes complicit in this system of mutual benefit. In India, the traditional view of corruption is linked with the exchange of money for favors or services, but corruption can also take subtler forms, such as the manipulation of information, favoritism in recruitment, and the misuse of state resources. The root causes of corruption lie in a combination of historical, cultural, political, and economic factors. Historical and cultural factors. To truly understand the extent of corruption in modern India, it's necessary to take a look at the country's history. During the colonial era, the British introduced a complex administrative system that was often inefficient and prone to corruption. This culture of bribery, favoritism, and exploitation became deeply ingrained, and it didn't disappear with India's independence in 1947. Post-independence, India's political structure also contributed to the prevalence of corruption. With a large, bureaucratic system in place, the sheer number of administrative and governmental officers created opportunities for graft. The close relationship between business elites and political leaders, particularly in the period following economic liberalization in the 1990s, led to the proliferation of corruption. This gave rise to crony capitalism, where politicians would favor businesses in return for kickbacks, creating a web of unethical practices. Culturally, corruption in India is often tolerated, with people seeing bribery as a necessary evil to get things done. It has become a part of the system, and in many cases, individuals feel that they have no choice but to pay bribes to survive within the system. This mindset has created a vicious cycle where corruption becomes normalized, and people begin to accept it as a part of life. Political corruption. The core of the problem. One of the most prominent areas where corruption thrives is politics. The political system in India, with its immense size and complexity, has become a breeding ground for unethical behavior. Political parties rely on money to fund their campaigns, which often leads to a culture of influence peddling and kickbacks. Politicians, both at the state and national levels, have frequently been accused of taking bribes in exchange for favors, passing laws, or securing government contracts for private businesses. Corruption in politics also plays a key role in the electoral process. Party funding, vote buying, and the manipulation of elections are common practices in Indian politics. There have been instances where election results have been influenced by the use of black money, with politicians using wealth and power to manipulate public opinion and electoral outcomes. In recent years, many high-profile corruption scandals involving politicians and businessmen have shaken the public's trust in the political system. Scandals like the 2G spectrum scam, coal allocation scam, and the Vyapam scam have exposed how entrenched corruption is within the government and how it undermines the democratic process. Economic impacts of corruption. Corruption in India has serious economic consequences. It deters investment, reduces economic efficiency, and promotes inequality. When businesses have to pay bribes to secure government contracts or licenses, it drives up costs for consumers and reduces the overall competitiveness of the economy. Furthermore, corruption fosters cronyism, where companies with political connections receive preferential treatment, undermining merit-based competition. The informal economy is also a casualty of corruption. Many small businesses are forced to pay bribes to local officials to avoid harassment or to operate legally. This makes it difficult for genuine, hard-working entrepreneurs to thrive, as they have to compete with companies that operate in a corrupt environment. the social impact of corruption is even more severe. Corruption diverts public funds intended for essential services such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. In the healthcare sector, for example, the diversion of funds meant for rural clinics and public health programs has led to inadequate healthcare services for the underprivileged. Similarly, the education system suffers from corruption in the form of bribery for admissions, exams, and teacher appointments, which compromises the quality of education for millions of children. The role of the media and civil society. Despite the widespread nature of corruption, India has seen a growing movement to combat it. The media, civil society organizations, and whistleblowers have played a significant role in exposing corrupt practices. Investigative journalism has uncovered numerous scams, while civil society groups have pushed for greater transparency and accountability in both the public and private sectors. The Right to Information Act, RTI, passed in 2005, was a major victory for those seeking to fight corruption. It empowered ordinary citizens to demand information from public authorities and hold them accountable. However, even with the RTI, there have been limitations in implementation, and it remains difficult for citizens to exercise their rights without facing harassment or retaliation. Several high-profile protests, such as the 2011 Anna Hazare-led anti-corruption movement, also highlighted the widespread demand for stronger anti-corruption laws and the establishment of an independent ombudsman. While the movement led to the creation of the Lokpal and Lokayuktas Act, aimed at setting up anti-corruption bodies, it has yet to be fully implemented, and its impact remains limited. Legal and institutional reforms. The Indian government has taken several steps to combat corruption, but the results have been mixed. On one hand, various laws like the Prevention of Corruption Act, the Central Vigilance Commission, CVC, and the Lokpal Act have been passed to curb corruption in public offices. On the other hand, the enforcement of these laws has been inconsistent, with corruption often going unpunished due to loopholes in the legal system, the slow pace of investigations, and the reluctance of authorities to act. A major obstacle in the fight against corruption is the lack of political will to address the issue. Many politicians and bureaucrats continue to benefit from the corrupt system, and efforts to reform it often face stiff resistance. The judicial system itself, which is supposed to uphold the law, is often bogged down by delays and inefficiencies, making it difficult to prosecute cases of corruption effectively. Additionally, the bureaucratic red tape in India means that many public services are still difficult to access without some form of bribery or manipulation. The introduction of e-governance, digitization of public services, and online platforms to file grievances has made some inroads in reducing corruption, but these measures alone are not enough to dismantle the system. Conclusion. The path forward. The problem of corruption in India is complex and multifaceted. It's rooted in history, culture, politics, and economics, and its effects are felt across all segments of society. While there have been some significant efforts to combat corruption, much more needs to be done to create a transparent, accountable, and corruption-free India. India needs to focus on systemic reforms that address the root causes of corruption, improve the efficiency of public institutions, and strengthen the rule of law. The role of the media, civil society, and ordinary citizens in demanding accountability cannot be overstated. Ultimately, tackling corruption requires a collective effort, one that involves not just the government, but every individual in society. Corruption may be a deeply entrenched problem, but with sustained efforts and a commitment to change, it's possible to envision an India where integrity, honesty, and transparency define the nation's future.